The sleek silver spacecraft descended through Earth's atmosphere with the grace of a falling feather. Inside, three alien scientists stared through the viewing panels at the sprawling medical complex below. Their crystalline bodies sparkled under the cabin lights as they prepared for their first real encounter with human medical practices. Lead researcher Blue adjusted their translation device and turned to address their team. "Remember, we are guests here. The humans have agreed to share their medical knowledge with us, despite being a relatively young species." The other two researchers, Green and Purple, nodded their crystal-faceted heads in acknowledgement. The ship landed on the hospital's designated pad, where a small welcoming committee waited. Dr. Anna Thompson stood at the front, her white coat crisp in the morning breeze. She had been chosen to lead the exchange program due to her extensive experience in human reproduction, a subject that particularly fascinated their alien visitors. As the ship's door opened with a soft hiss, Dr. Thompson couldn't help but marvel at the aliens' appearance. They looked like walking crystals, their bodies semi-transparent and reflecting light in rainbow patterns. Each was roughly human-sized, but moved with an otherworldly grace that made them appear to float rather than walk. "Welcome to Central Medical Institute," Dr. Thompson said, keeping her voice steady despite her excitement. "We're honored to have you here." Lead researcher Blue stepped forward, their body pulsing with gentle blue light as they spoke through their translator. "The honor is ours, Dr. Thompson. We have studied your medical data for months, but seeing your facility in person is enlightening." The other two researchers moved forward as well. Green's body emitted a soft emerald glow, while Purple's deeper hues reflected their more reserved nature. They had spent years studying various species across the galaxy, but humans had caught their attention due to their unique reproductive process. As they walked through the hospital corridors, other staff members and patients stopped to stare. It wasn't every day that crystalline beings from another world toured their facility. Dr. Thompson led them to the obstetrics ward, where they would begin their research. "Our species," Blue explained as they walked, "reproduces through a process of cellular division and biocrystallization. It is completely painless and takes exactly 47 of your Earth days." They paused, their crystal structure flickering with curiosity. "We have read about human reproduction, but we find it difficult to believe." Dr. Thompson smiled. "I understand. It's very different from your process. Human pregnancy lasts approximately 280 days, and the birth process itself can take anywhere from a few hours to more than a day." The aliens stopped walking simultaneously, their bodies flashing with shock. "Hours?" Purple spoke for the first time, their translator struggling to convey their disbelief. "And the humans survive this." "Not only do they survive," Dr. Thompson replied, "but many choose to go through it multiple times." Green's crystal structure vibrated with what seemed to be nervous energy. "And you say this process involves physical separation of two bodies through an opening that must expand." Dr. Thompson nodded, trying to hide her amusement at their obvious discomfort. "Perhaps it would be easier to show you our educational materials first, before we move on to actual observations." The aliens agreed quickly, almost too quickly, and followed her into a conference room. As Dr. Thompson began setting up the presentation, she couldn't help but notice how the three researchers huddled together, their crystal bodies dimmed with what she assumed was apprehension. What these alien scientists didn't yet understand was that they were about to witness one of humanity's most remarkable capabilities, the ability to endure and triumph over what seemed impossible. Their education was about to begin, and Dr. Thompson had a feeling it would change their view of humans forever. As she started the presentation, she saw Green lean over to Blue and whisper something that made their translator crackle. "Are we absolutely certain these humans aren't some kind of super beings?" Dr. Thompson smiled to herself. This was going to be an interesting exchange indeed. 1 week into their study at Central Medical Institute, the alien researchers were still trying to process what they'd learned about human reproduction. They sat in their specially designed crystalline chairs in the conference room, reviewing footage of various mammalian births. "Look at this again," Purple said, their body flickering with distress as they replayed a video of a cat giving birth. Even their four-legged companions reproduced this way. It's not just the humans. Green's crystalline form pulsed with a gentle light that indicated fascination. And yet, humans have the most complex process of all Earth mammals. Their infants have the largest head-to-body ratio, making their delivery even more. They paused, searching for the right word. Horrifying. Blue finished, their usual confident glow dimmed slightly. Dr. Thompson walked in carrying several medical charts. She had gotten used to the aliens' dramatic reactions to human biology. "Today, we'll be reviewing some actual patient cases," she announced. "We have several expectant mothers who have agreed to let you observe their prenatal checkups." The aliens' bodies simultaneously lit up with mixed colors of excitement and anxiety. This would be their first interaction with pregnant humans. In their species, reproduction happened in isolation chambers, with no contact between the dividing being and others until the process was complete. The first patient was Mary, 8 months pregnant with her second child. As she lay on the examination table, the alien researchers hovered nearby, their crystalline forms casting rainbow patterns on the walls. "May I?" Green asked, holding up a scanner. Mary nodded, and the alien passed the device over her swollen belly. Suddenly, the baby kicked. The movement was visible through Mary's shirt, and all three aliens jumped back, their bodies flashing brilliant colors of shock. "It moved," Purple exclaimed, their translator barely keeping up with their agitated state. The small human moved inside the larger human. Mary laughed. "Would you like to feel it? The baby's quite active today." The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. After a moment, Green stepped forward, extending a crystalline appendage. When the baby kicked again, Green's entire body lit up like a Christmas tree. "Fascinating," Green whispered. "The infant is already capable of movement before emergence. Our crystalline offspring don't move until the final division is complete." Dr. Thompson smiled as she continued the examination. "The baby is developing normally," she explained, showing them the ultrasound. "See here. That's the head, and those are the hands." Blue moved closer to the screen, their body pulsing with concentration. "And this entire being must pass through." They couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," Dr. Thompson said calmly. "The birth canal. We'll be covering that in detail next week." Purple's color faded so much they became almost transparent. "Next week. Perhaps I should return to our ship to analyze our current data." "Nonsense," Blue said, though their own glow was rather faint. "We are scientists. We must understand this process completely, no matter how unusual it seems." After Mary left, the aliens huddled together, comparing notes on their tablets. Their bodies flickered with various colors as they discussed what they'd learned. "Their offspring develop inside them for nearly a full Earth year," Green marveled. "And they carry out their daily tasks the entire time." "And the changes to their bodies," Purple added, still sounding shocked. "The stretching, the internal organ rearrangement. Most remarkable," Blue agreed, "though I still cannot comprehend how they." They fell silent as Dr. Thompson returned with more files. "Tomorrow," she announced, "we'll be reviewing the different stages of labor and delivery." The aliens' bodies all flashed pale with what could only be described as terror, but none of them moved to leave. Despite their horror, their scientific curiosity was fully engaged. They had to know more about these incredible humans who could accomplish what their species would consider impossible. Little did they know, their real education was about to begin. The morning had started normally enough at Central Medical Institute. The alien researchers were in their usual conference room, studying birth preparation videos with expressions that made their crystalline bodies flicker between fascination and horror. "And humans willingly sign these birth plans?" Purple asked, their form shimmering with disbelief as they reviewed the documents. "Knowing exactly what will happen to them," Green added, their glow dimming considerably. Before Dr. Thompson could respond, a nurse burst into the room. "Doctor, Rose Miller just came in. She's in active labor, 6 centimeters dilated." The aliens' bodies all flashed brilliant white with alarm. They had been scheduled to observe their first actual birth next week, after more preparation. This was not part of the plan. "I have to go," Dr. Thompson said, standing quickly. "You can continue reviewing the materials." "We must observe." Blue interrupted, their usual calm demeanor crackling with excitement and terror. "We are scientists. This is a unique research opportunity." Dr. Thompson hesitated. Rose Miller had signed a consent form allowing the alien researchers to observe her delivery, but they hadn't expected it to be today. "All right," she finally agreed. "But you must stay out of the way and remain calm. Human birth can be intense." The 3 crystalline beings followed her to the delivery room, their bodies pulsing with nervous energy. As they entered, they heard a sound that made them all stop dead in their tracks. Rose was groaning through a contraction, her face red with effort. The aliens had never heard such a sound before. Their species was physically incapable of expressing pain vocally. "Is she dying?" Green whispered, their form trembling. "No, this is normal," Dr. Thompson assured them as she quickly washed her hands and put on her medical gear. "This is just part of the process." The aliens huddled in a corner, their bodies synchronizing into a shared pale blue of anxiety. They watched as the medical team moved efficiently around Rose, checking monitors and offering encouragement. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," one nurse announced. Purple's crystal structure vibrated in shock. It has a separate heartbeat while still inside. Another contraction hit, and Rose gripped the bed rails. The aliens' bodies flashed in response to her every groan and movement. When the contraction ended, she lay back, breathing heavily. "You're doing great, Rose," Dr. Thompson encouraged. "The baby's moving down nicely." Blue's translator crackled as they processed this information. "Moving down? You mean it's descending through the—" They couldn't finish the sentence because Rose started another contraction. This time she sat up, instinctively changing positions. The aliens watched in amazement as the human body naturally worked to birth the baby. "How is she so functional?" Green wondered aloud. "In our reproduction chambers, the dividing being cannot move or communicate for days." A particularly strong contraction made Rose cry out. The aliens' bodies flashed so brightly that the medical staff had to ask them to dim their glow. "Should we not help her?" Purple asked anxiously. "Can we not take over the process somehow?" Dr. Thompson shook her head as she checked Rose's progress. "Her body knows what to do. We're here to support the natural process." The aliens found this concept difficult to grasp. Their own reproduction was completely controlled and regulated. This raw, primal process seemed chaotic and frightening to them. 7 centimeters now," Dr. Thompson announced after checking Rose again. Blue's translator struggled to keep up with their agitated state. 7. But that means—" "Yes," Dr. Thompson confirmed, hiding a smile. "We're getting close to the actual delivery." All 3 aliens swayed slightly, their crystal forms paling to an almost transparent state, but none of them moved to leave. Despite their horror, they were witnessing something unprecedented in their scientific careers. As Rose began another contraction, Green whispered to the others, "Humans are either the bravest or the most insane species we've ever encountered." "Perhaps," Blue replied softly. "They are both." The delivery room had become a scene of organized chaos. Rose was now fully dilated, and the aliens were witnessing something they had only seen in educational videos, a human actually giving birth. "It's time to push," Dr. Thompson announced calmly. The 3 crystalline beings huddled closer together in their corner, their bodies flickering with such intense colors that they looked like malfunctioning Christmas lights. Green had developed a slight crack in their lower crystal structure from stress. "The human is going to push," Purple's translator squeaked. "Push what?" Where? Their question was answered immediately as Rose bore down with her first push. The aliens watched in absolute horror as they realized what was happening. Blue's usually commanding presence diminished to a pale, almost transparent state. The infant human. It's really going to come out that way. Green stammered, their crystal structure vibrating with disbelief. Dr. Thompson, focused on guiding Rose through the delivery, simply nodded. You can see the baby's head starting to crown, she said professionally. All three aliens moved forward slightly, scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming their horror. Then they saw what crowning actually meant. Purple promptly toppled backward, their crystal form chiming against the floor. The medical staff had to pause briefly to help the alien back up. This defies all logical biological engineering, Blue exclaimed, their translator struggling to keep up with their agitated state. The dimensions are impossible. It cannot fit. Rose let out another powerful grunt as she pushed again. The aliens watched in terrified fascination as the baby's head emerged further. In our species, Green whispered, seemingly to comfort themselves, the new being simply grows until it reaches the correct size, then separates cleanly along predetermined crystalline planes. That's nice, Rose managed to say between pushes, showing remarkable patience with her unusual audience. Dr. Thompson continued to guide the delivery with practiced ease. The head is almost out. You're doing great, Rose. The aliens had begun to sway in unison, their crystal structures humming with stress. A nurse had to remind them 3 times to dim their increasingly bright glow. But the bones. Purple suddenly realized, their voice rising to a pitch that made their translator crackle. Surely the bones are too rigid too. Human babies have soft spots in their skulls, Dr. Thompson explained while monitoring the baby's progress, and the mother's body releases hormones that allow her pelvic bones to stretch. This information did not seem to comfort the aliens. If anything, their colors paled further. The bones stretch. Blue's voice was barely a whisper. The skull has soft spots. Green's crystal structure developed another small crack. Our offspring emerge fully formed, with proper crystal lattice structure. This is. They were interrupted by Rose's loudest grunt yet. The baby's head was now fully visible. Look away if you need to, a nurse suggested kindly to the aliens, noting their increasingly unstable appearance. But they couldn't look away. Despite their horror, or perhaps because of it, they remained frozen in place, watching as nature took its course. One more big push, Rose, Dr. Thompson encouraged. The aliens clutched each other's crystalline appendages so tightly they created small rainbow sparkles where their surfaces met. This is what they meant in the historical documents, Blue muttered. When they said humans were made of stronger stuff, we thought it was metaphorical. Purple's translator had given up entirely and was just emitting small beeps of distress. Green, somehow finding their scientific voice, managed to ask, and humans do this billions of times across their world. Every day, Dr. Thompson confirmed, still focused on the delivery. Has been happening since the beginning of our species. The aliens' bodies all flashed with matching pulses of disbelief and amazement. They had studied countless species across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared them for this display of human endurance and determination. As Rose prepared for her final push, Blue whispered to their fellow researchers, perhaps we should revise our assessment of humanity's classification in the Galactic Species Database. The other two could only nod, their crystal forms trembling as they braced themselves for what was about to happen next. With one final, powerful push, Rose delivered her baby into Dr. Thompson's waiting hands. The room filled with the sound of the newborn's first cry, a sound that made all 3 alien researchers jump so violently their crystal bodies chimed like bells. It's a girl, Dr. Thompson announced, quickly checking the baby's vital signs. And she's perfect. The aliens stared in stunned silence as the medical team efficiently cleaned the newborn, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and placed her on Rose's chest. Their horror at the birthing process suddenly transformed into something entirely different as they witnessed the first moments between mother and child. "The small human, it's already breathing," Purple asked, their crystal structure gradually returning to its normal color. "And making sounds. Look at how they bond," Green whispered, moving closer to observe. Their body was emanating a soft, warm glow that hadn't been seen before. "The infant knows its mother immediately." Blue's translator worked overtime as they rapidly documented their observations. "The neural connection appears instantaneous." "But how?" "There are no crystalline synchronization points, no bioelectronic merging." Rose smiled tiredly at the aliens as she held her daughter. "Would you like to come closer and see her?" The three researchers approached cautiously, their bodies now pulsing with gentle colors of curiosity rather than panic. They watched in fascination as the baby gripped her mother's finger. Such primitive yet effective bonding mechanisms, Blue noted, their horror giving way to scientific interest. The physical contact appears to trigger numerous biological responses in both mother and offspring. A nurse approached with a bottle of water for Rose. As she drank, Green's crystal structure vibrated with sudden understanding. The mother's body is already beginning recovery after such an enormous physical effort. "Yes," Dr. Thompson confirmed, checking Rose's vital signs. "Human bodies are remarkably resilient." The aliens watched as the baby began to root around, instinctively searching for her first meal. Their bodies flickered with new colors of amazement when they realized what was happening. "The infant already knows how to seek nutrition," Purple exclaimed. "Our offspring require 3 days of crystalline programming before they can begin energy absorption." Rose laughed softly as she helped her daughter latch on for her first feeding. The aliens' bodies all pulsed with matching waves of wonder as they observed this natural process. "I must revise all my previous assumptions about human biological capabilities," Blue announced, their voice filled with newfound respect. "What appeared chaotic and primitive actually demonstrates remarkable sophistication." Green moved closer still, studying the baby's tiny features. "Look at the complexity of the miniature human, fully formed and functioning, despite the seemingly traumatic emergence process. And the mother," Purple added, their crystal structure now glowing with warm colors of admiration. "She appears happy after experiencing what we just witnessed." Rose smiled at them. "Of course I'm happy. I have my beautiful daughter now. Everything else was just part of the journey to meet her." The aliens' bodies all flickered with matching pulses of understanding. They had come to study human reproduction as outside observers, expecting to document a primitive and horrifying process. Instead, they had witnessed something that challenged their entire understanding of biological sophistication. "In all our studies across the galaxy," Blue said softly, "we have never seen anything quite like this. Your species continues to surprise us, Dr. Thompson." Dr. Thompson smiled as she finished her post-delivery checks. "Life usually does surprise us. That's what makes it beautiful." The three researchers stood in thoughtful silence, their crystal forms glowing with gentle, harmonious colors as they watched the new mother and child. Their initial horror had been completely replaced by something much more profound: respect. "Perhaps," Green whispered to their colleagues, "we have been measuring biological advancement by the wrong criteria all along." Blue nodded, their crystal structure pulsing with warm light. "Indeed, there appears to be far more to strength than we previously understood." Back in their ship's laboratory, the three alien researchers gathered to compose their official report to their homeworld. Their crystal bodies still pulsed with the lingering effects of what they had witnessed in the delivery room. "How do we even begin to explain this?" Purple asked, their form shifting through various shades of uncertainty as they stared at their datapad. Blue's crystal structure hummed thoughtfully. "Perhaps we should start with a revision of our previous classifications of human biological capabilities." The ship's computer projected their original assessment of human reproduction in glowing letters. "Preliminary analysis: inefficient, dangerous, and primitive biological process. Demonstrates lack of evolutionary advancement. Green let out a chiming sound that their species used to indicate embarrassment. We may have been somewhat hasty in our initial judgment. As they began composing their new report, their bodies synchronized into matching colors of scientific focus. Blue's translator vocalized their words as they dictated. Updated analysis. Human reproduction represents one of the most remarkable biological processes we have encountered in our galactic surveys. While appearing chaotic and dangerous by our standards, it demonstrates extraordinary adaptability and resilience. Purple added their observations. The human body's ability to stretch, adjust, and recover from the birthing process exceeds our previous understanding of biological limitations. Their skeletal structure alone exhibits flexibility we had deemed impossible. Don't forget the neural aspects. Green chimed in, their crystal structure brightening with excitement. The immediate bond between mother and infant, achieved without any technological assistance or crystalline synchronization, suggests biological programming far more sophisticated than we initially recognized. The three researchers spent hours compiling their data, their bodies occasionally flashing with renewed amazement as they reviewed the recordings of the birth they had witnessed. Should we include a warning? Purple asked suddenly. For any future research teams. Blue's form rippled with what their species used to indicate amusement. Yes, perhaps. Warning. Direct observation of human birth may cause crystal structure destabilization and temporary system shock, and permanent revision of all previous assumptions about human capabilities, Green added, touching the small crack in their crystal structure that had yet to fully heal. As they continued their report, they included detailed observations about human endurance, pain tolerance, and biological engineering. They noted how the entire process, while appearing traumatic, was actually a precisely choreographed biological sequence. Most remarkable of all, Blue dictated, is the human's acceptance of this process. They view it not as a biological necessity to be endured, but as a meaningful experience to be embraced. The ship's computer processed their report, adding it to the galactic database. As they reviewed the final draft, their bodies all pulsed with matching colors of reverence. We should recommend an upgrade to humanity's classification in the Galactic Species Registry, Purple suggested, their crystal structure glowing with conviction. Agreed, Blue responded. Their biological resilience alone warrants a higher rating, but their psychological adaptation to such an intense process suggests capabilities we hadn't previously considered. Green's form sparkled as they added one final note to the report. It appears that what we initially perceived as primitive actually represents an advanced form of biological engineering, one that prioritizes adaptability and resilience over comfort and control. As they finished their report, a message arrived from their homeworld. More research teams were being dispatched to Earth, interested in studying other aspects of human biology. Their observations had opened up entirely new fields of scientific inquiry. They want us to continue our studies here, Blue announced, their crystal structure brightening with pleasure. Purple's translator crackled with what sounded like nervous laughter. As long as we don't have to witness another birth immediately. Actually, Green said, checking their data pad, Dr. Thompson invited us to observe a scheduled birth next week. She says this one might be twins. The sound of three crystal beings groaning in unison filled the ship's laboratory, but beneath their apparent distress, their bodies pulsed with unmistakable colors of fascination and respect. They had come to study humans, but they were the ones getting an education. 1 month after witnessing their first human birth, the alien researchers found themselves in a peculiar situation. They were attending a small celebration at the hospital, a human tradition called a baby shower, for one of their upcoming research subjects. The three crystalline beings sat somewhat awkwardly in the hospital's break room, their bodies casting rainbow patterns on the walls as they watched humans engage in various ritualistic activities involving tiny clothes and colorful packages. I still don't understand, Purple said quietly to Dr. Thompson. These humans are celebrating something that will cause them significant physical distress. Dr. Thompson smiled as she watched the mother-to-be open another gift. We celebrate new life, and yes, the courage it takes to bring it into the world. Blue's crystal structure pulsed with curiosity. In our society, we treat reproduction as a purely biological function. It happens in isolation, without ceremony. That's where we differ, Rose said, walking over with her month-old daughter in her arms. The same baby whose birth had nearly caused the aliens to short-circuit their translation devices. For us, it's about more than just biology. It's about connection, community, and growth. The aliens watched as the baby was passed around the room, each human taking turns holding her and making what the researchers had learned were called cooing noises. Most fascinating, Green observed, their form glowing warmly. The entire social group participates in caring for the offspring, even those not biologically related. The pregnant woman they were going to observe next month, Jane, sat down near them, her hands resting on her swollen belly. Would you like to feel the baby kick again? He's quite active today. The aliens, who would have recoiled in horror a month ago, now moved forward with cautious interest. Their crystal structures flickered with gentle lights as they felt the movement. We've been studying your species for weeks now, Blue said thoughtfully, and we keep discovering new aspects of your strength. It's not just physical. What do you mean? Jane asked, wincing slightly as the baby kicked again. Your willingness to endure discomfort for a greater purpose, Purple explained, their translator struggling to convey the complex concept. In our society, we've eliminated all unnecessary physical stress from our lives. But you've lost something in the process, haven't you? Dr. Thompson asked gently. The aliens' bodies all pulsed with matching colors of realization. Yes, Blue admitted. Perhaps we have. Our reproduction is painless and perfect, but it lacks meaning. Connection, Green added. Joy, Purple concluded, watching as Rose's baby smiled at another nurse. The celebration continued around them, filled with laughter, stories, and advice being shared between experienced mothers and first-time parents. The aliens observed it all, their crystal structures glowing with new understanding. We came here to study human biological processes, Blue said to Dr. Thompson, but we've learned something far more valuable. Oh, Dr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. And what's that? That strength isn't about avoiding difficulty, Blue replied. It's about finding purpose in facing it. Green's structure sparkled in agreement. Your species doesn't just endure. You celebrate your challenges. You find joy in them. And you support each other through them, Purple added, watching as the humans continued to share stories and advice. As the party wound down, the aliens prepared to return to their ship. They had another birth to observe soon, and this time, they felt ready. Their initial horror had been replaced by deep respect and understanding. You know, Dr. Thompson said as she walked them out, I think you've taught us something too. What could we possibly have taught you? Blue asked, surprised. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to remind us how remarkable our ordinary really is. The aliens' bodies glowed with warm, harmonious colors as they left the hospital. They had come to study what they thought was a primitive biological process. Instead, they had discovered a profound truth about strength, community, and the real meaning of advancement. As their ship lifted off, 3 crystalline beings looked down at the hospital with new eyes. Perhaps, they thought, it was time to bring some of these human lessons back to their own world.